Scooby-Doo, Where Are You? Is personally one of my favorite classic Hanna-Barbera cartoon shows. Now, the show tackled many a ghost, goblin, and ghouls, but one of the things it failed to tackle is, why does Scooby-Doo speak English? Now, the gang considered it normal amongst their crew, but others always exclaimed, wait a minute, that dog can talk? Some of us would simply chalk it up to simple cartoon logic. I mean, after all, Hanna-Barbera is known for their numerous talking animal cartoon shows. But there's been a fan theory circulating on the internet that purports Scooby to have been bred as a super intelligent test subject for the Soviet space program. Now, I know how crazy it might sound, but this fan theory makes some pretty good points. Hey everyone, I'm Akeem with channel Frederator, and on today's Cartoon Conspiracy, we're going to explore this very fan theory and see if there's any validity to it. So put on your super sleuthing hat and let's try to find some clues and see if Scooby was, in fact, bred as a super intelligent test subject for the Soviet space program. Like, this is gonna be so good, Scoob! Like, let's watch! A little over a year ago, Reddit user by the name of the Mighty Heptagon concocted a very compelling theory on the true origins of Scooby-Doo, based on the global landscape that Scooby-Doo, Where Are You premiered on television. Scooby-Doo, Where Are You premiered in 1969. Now, this was during the Cold War era. The Reddit user goes on to say that by the time the show premiered, the Soviet Space Agency had been going strong for years, with Sputnik 1 becoming the world's first artificial satellite in 1957, and Yuri Gagarin, a Soviet pilot, becoming the first man in space in 1961. Now, while Gagarin was in fact the first man in space, he wasn't the first living creature. Before Gagarin's fateful flight, the Soviets experimented with sending dogs to space. These living test subjects and dogs being sent to space were met with varying outcomes. Laika, a stray dog from the streets of Moscow, was sent into space and died from overheating in Earth's atmosphere a few hours after being launched. The Soviets did have success in two other living test subjects and dogs, Belka and Stroka, in 1960, who both became the first Earth-born creatures ever to fly into space and return alive. Now that we have a little bit of history and background about the Cold War, the Soviet space program, and the dogs they initially sent to space as test subjects, how does all this tie back to Scooby-Doo being bred as part of an intelligence program? I'm pretty sure that's the question you're asking yourself. Well, the Mighty Heptagon's theory goes on to say that based on the Soviets' history with using dogs as test subjects for flight experiments, it's fair to assume that they may have also used dogs for other kinds of experimental programs. An experimental breeding program that could have produced dogs with greatly enhanced intelligence. When I think of Scooby-Doo, I don't exactly think of the word intelligence, but speaking in reality terms, it would make a lot of sense for the Soviets to explore higher intelligence in animals so as to minimize the risk of losing one of their comrades. If you're able to breed an intelligent animal, in this case a dog, you can get that animal to understand basic commands, control vehicles, and possibly even handle weapons. These are all things we've seen Scooby-Doo do. Yes, I know what I just said. Yeah, let's grow up, please. Now, the theory goes on to have us assume that the Soviets in the Scooby-Doo universe did in fact have a breeding intelligence program amongst dogs. Maybe the Soviets unintentionally gave birth to at least one dog who was smart enough to learn and imitate human speech. Cue Scooby-Dooby-Doo! Sorry, I need to work on my Scooby impression. The theory then goes on to say Scooby began his life as a test subject in the space agency's breeding program, but somehow escaped when one of the scientists bonded with him as a puppy, thus decided to take him to America when he defected from the Union. Then, maybe upon the death of his original owner, was then adopted by Shaggy and the gang, where they remained on the road visiting various small towns, solving mysteries. The Mighty Heptagon's theory then continues to go on to explore the reasoning as to why the show was entitled Scooby-Doo, Where Are You? Why was it named such? Well, the CIA. Apparently, based on this particular theory, though we never saw it on the show, there were more than a few American G-men who spent years trying to find Scooby and the gang while they went around solving mysteries of their own. Like, I've never seen a G-man, man! I don't know, but that's what the theory says. I know what you're saying. My brain hurts just thinking about it as well, guys. Now, one of the interesting connective pieces to this that the author of this theory concocted is just how Scooby might have gotten to Soviet Russia, and it's based on his family lineage. Scooby is a Great Dane, a German breed. Now, the Germans were responsible for most of the early research into rocket technology during World War II, and many of the Soviet space agency's researchers were in fact German-born scientists recruited by the Russians. So it's likely that Scooby's parents were brought over from Germany along with the researchers who helped breed them. This entire theory has been one heck of a mind bender, and certainly has warped my perception of one of my favorite animated television shows. There are so many things to break down here, so let's explore how this whole thing holds up. Saying that Scooby-Doo is part of an intelligence program created by the Soviets is a pretty cool theory. But in order for this to be anywhere near being true, we'd have to ignore many things we already know about Scooby and his family lineage. First off, Scooby's family lineage dates back to the great Yankee Doodle Doo, who came to Plymouth on the Mayflower with his master Mick Baggy Rogers, one of Shaggy's ancestors. We find this out in the new Scooby and Scrappy-Doo show, where he appears in an illustration in a book along with Shaggy's ancestor. Like hot dog, Scoob, my family were pilgrims. So this means that Scooby's family came to America originally from England in 1620, along with other pilgrims. This also means that Scooby's family has been in the United States for well over 300 years, long before the Cold War and far, far away from Soviet Russia. Given this particular fact, this pretty much renders this particular theory null and void. Interesting how taking a simple look at Scooby's family tree solved this entire mystery. If Scooby-Doo Where Are You was where the Scooby-Doo franchise ended, perhaps there'd be some validity to this theory. But given that the show continued on with the Scooby-Doo movies, Scooby-Doo and Scrappy-Doo, just to name a few, well, we're given more background to discern a more reasonable and logical explanation as to why Scooby has mastered the skill of speech. Scooby comes from a long line of speaking dogs, which this particular theory doesn't address. Mama and Papa Doo, Scooby-Dum, even fan favorite Scrappy-Dappy-Doo all have mastered the English language. Each speaks it fluently to varying degrees of audibility. You know, honestly, when you think about it, it seems as though Scooby is the only one in his family who speaks it with an impediment. I mean, come on, Scooby. But why? One of the other points from this particular theory is the name of the show being Scooby-Doo Where Are You is because, in fact, he's being hunted down by the CIA unbeknownst to the viewing audience. Now, this particular assertion is easily disproved, as we've seen numerous episodes of Shaggy exclaiming, "Like Scooby-Doo, where are you?" Boom, it's theory. That's the end of that particular assertion. Now, another point of reference that goes unaddressed is a pup named Scooby-Doo. Taking this particular series into account, it's safe to say that Scooby was in fact a puppy when he was in the hands of Shaggy and the gang. So when would this whole intelligence program with the Soviets have taken place? I mean, I don't see the timeline here. Now, I believe that this particular theory is looking at a singular iteration of the Scooby-Doo franchise to postulate a hypothesis regarding Scooby's origin. Given what we know about the franchise, there is some continuity between some of the iterations of the Scooby-Doo series. Of course, aside from those that pretty much reimagined the series, like Be Cool Scooby-Doo and Shaggy and Scooby-Doo Get a Clue. When it comes to theories of this magnitude, you can't simply ignore the mythos created around the franchise by the writers and the creators. At least you shouldn't. This theory requires you to suspend your disbelief in what you know about Scooby-Doo in order for this to be the grim reality of Scooby's past. Though I have to admit, the Scooby franchise has in fact taken some liberties with the entire gang's origin stories. In the comic Scooby-Doo Apocalypse, the story of Scooby involves him being the result of an intelligence experiment program where the military is breeding canines to use in combat, with Scooby being the original smart dog prototype, Subject 2460 0302. So maybe the OP of the Reddit theory was inspired by the comic. As to whether this theory holds up as to Scooby-Doo being bred as part of a Soviet intelligence program, well, I'm gonna have to give it 1 Scooby snack out of 5. Though the theory has some intriguing points that draws from real-life instances, once you take a look at Scooby's family lineage, it kind of just falls apart. The overall Reddit theory is a very interesting read and well thought out, but doesn't pull much from the actual franchise or address some of the things we know based on the varying iterations of the show. If Scooby was in fact bred by the Soviets, how do you explain Scrappy Dappy Doo's sudden appearance? I mean, his origin story is literally he was thrown off of a moving train while packed loosely in a cardboard box. I mean, that's the extent of his origin story. It's explained in the opening sequence of the show. I mean, seeing that as a kid, it was really confusing. I'd urge you guys to give the Reddit post a read if you haven't already, and share with us your thoughts. Do you think this particular theory holds up? Outside of chalking it up to simple cartoon logic, why do you think Scooby-Doo is able to speak? The real question is, why does he have such a speech impediment? And which iteration of the Scooby-Doo franchise is your favorite? I'd personally have to say the 13 Ghosts of Scooby-Doo because it had the Master of Fright, Vincent Price. And I know this might be a very unpopular opinion, but Scrappy Dappy Doo was awesome in that series. And he really did a lot of maturing from when we were first introduced to him in Scooby-Doo and Scrappy-Doo. Though we did get our fair share of puppy power! Which honestly isn't necessarily a bad thing. I mean, if you like that. Once again, I'm Akeem with Channel Frederator, and thank you guys for watching. Like, if you enjoyed the video, please drop us a like. And if you're new here, man, you gotta click the subscribe button. And don't forget to click the bell to become part of our notification gang. Like, and always remember, man, Frederator loves you.